Let me check our. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here, and want to welcome everyone to our station out here on the west side. Love the murals up top, by the way, so I'll take a quick tour a little bit later, but I'm trying to go to hit every fire station, and so this is one of the last 10 left, so especially glad to be here. But we're here to announce something that is very important for our entire department, and really by extension, central New Mexico. And so as you know, folks hopefully have noticed we've made some unprecedented investments in terms of public safety as a whole. And that means innovating when it comes to using our resources in the best way to support our first responders, both as individuals, as people, and as departments. Now, our commitment to Albuquerque Fire Rescue, of course, our number one resource in terms of its firefighters and EMTs and responders, is really what we can do is invest in the resources dedicated to their health and wellness. And that's what this is all about today. And we know that, you know, our firefighters, their heroic work takes a toll, especially over their 25-year career. And this is something that I first got involved in back when I was a state senator working on the preemptive causation bill. It's changed names, but really understanding the cumulative impacts of what these folks behind me have to deal with, in particular when they go into these very dangerous situations, and how those can have lifelong, very traumatic effects, both physical and mental. And so for us, the city of Albuquerque is proud to announce that we're continuing a very strong relationship with IAFF Local 244, and we're reinforcing really our connection with collaboration with the union, the organized union that's, of course, the foundation of AFR, but also understanding health and wellness of our firefighters and how our city and our administration can really step up to do this. And so we're going to let our Deputy Chief, Sean Frazier, announce sort of officially and tell you about this program, but we are bringing on a behavioral health director in-house for the department. And Maya Dalton-Theodore is here with us today, so we're going to hear from her. Some departments around the country have this, which is great. It's a very proven model. It's successful, and it's been long desired and needed right here in Albuquerque. And so we're very excited to announce it today. So with more on this, DC Frazier. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon. This is an exciting time for the Albuquerque Fire Rescue. Historically, our firefighters, our men and women, have been very, very good reactive problem solvers, right? That's the nature of our job. An alarm goes off, they get on the truck, they mitigate the emergency, and then they do it again and again and again. But in recent years, there's been a different alarm that's been sounding. And it's an alarm that requires a proactive way of problem solving in addition to the traditional reactive way. And that alarm, quite simply, ladies and gentlemen, is the mental health crisis in the fire service in our country today. Now, I use that word crisis, and that is not hyperbole, and I do not use that term lightly. But in recent years, across the country, we have lost more firefighters to suicide than we have lost to line of duty deaths on the fire ground. And unfortunately, AFR has not been immune to this. 2 years ago, we tragically lost one of our own members to suicide. And his name was Andres Chavez, and we honor his memory today, and we continue to mourn him to this day. As the Deputy Chief of Human Resources, I am very acutely aware that the number one resource that we have and we need to protect is the men and women of the Albuquerque Fire Rescue. And that's why I'm so excited to stand in front of you today to announce that we've taken concrete steps to ensure that we protect the health and wellness of our firefighters. I would like to thank Mayor Keller and his administration for their assistance on this. I would like to thank Vice President Breezewine and IFF Local 244 for their collaboration and their input. But I can tell you we've done things that will guarantee the health and wellness of our members, not just today, but for years in the future. For the first time in the history of AFR, we have a sworn health and wellness officer, Lieutenant Miguel Tipman, who oversees a multitude of programs that can assist our members who are in need. We have a peer support team, which is composed of sworn men and women of the Albuquerque Fire Rescue that are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to respond to the needs of the men and women of Albuquerque Fire Rescue. When I took this position 3.5 years ago, we had 12. And as I stand before you today, we have nearly 50 men and women dedicated to our members' needs. We've also reconstituted and expanded the chaplaincy program, which for years suffered from inattention and neglect. And finally, in a truly historic moment for our organization, for the first time in the history of the Albuquerque Fire Rescue, we have a full-time licensed behavioral health director. So it is with great honor, and it is my privilege to introduce to you, all the way from Alexandria, Virginia, Miss Maya Dalton Theodore.
Thank you, Chief Frazier. Mayor Keller, Chief Gallegos, and the leadership of the Local 244, I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to continue to work in a very honorable job of supporting the men and women in this industry, and it's an industry that's very dear to my heart. Having firefighters in my family, both from Indianapolis, Indiana Fire Department, and also from Arlington, Virginia Fire Department, and I also worked for the last 7 years with the firefighters and paramedics of Fairfax County Fire and Rescue. I fully appreciate the personalities that are very unique to this workforce, but also the daily challenges and traumas that these people experience, and they're serving our community day to day. I really look forward to continuing the ongoing mission of normalizing the ability for people to ask for help and reducing the stigma, and also to continue the work around behavioral health for this department. One of the things that impressed me when I applied for this job was the fact that labor and management were working so collaboratively, and also that the city was willing to build an infrastructure for this department so that the men and women could be taken care of. We have a commitment to continue to build on the resources that you have here in Albuquerque, and there are a number of clinical resources that I was very impressed with. And we want to continue to build a net, a safety net for these folks so that they can reach out for help. We also look forward to building new relationships within our community, and I say our because now I am part of your community, and is also to strengthen the foundation of this department so that the men and women in this department can continue to serve the community. Thank you so much. It's a great honor.
Well, thank you so much, Maya. We're so glad to have you here. And I'm guessing if there's any questions, they're really for these folks, but are there any questions?
What exactly does the job entail? Like, what will you be doing as behavioral?
Sure. You want to start? She's so new. We'll let DC start.
We'll let DC start.
Yeah, so, and actually, she's literally hit the ground running. So we have members that have a variety of mental health needs. A lot of them center around the calls that they go on. So since day one, with Lieutenant Tittman's assistance, they've been reaching out to these members to make sure that they're okay, or if they need something, to direct them to those resources. Again, going back to the proactive part of what I talked about, Ms. Dalton Theodore will be interacting with our members as cadets, literally from the first day they walk into the fire academy, to let them know, hey, this is what you have available to you. Please use it, because as the mayor talked about, 25 years is a long time. She's also helping to further educational opportunities with the peer support team and I'm sure I'm forgetting all kinds of stuff, but that's the great point. One of the questions we get asked a lot is, what do we do for our retirees that have done 20, 25, 30 years and then leave and might not have these resources available to them? So again, Lieutenant Tittman, Ms. Dalton Theodore are actively meeting with the Retirees Association to see if they can get retirees trained in a peer support model to help retired firefighters. Does that answer your question?
When was your first day?
Well, I arrived at Albuquerque Airport on April 9th, and my first day was April 12th. So.
Nice.
So will it just be like peer support type things, or is it going to be counseling, or what is your job? Can you go into it further a little bit more? Like, is there going to be info sessions that you're going to be presenting, or what sort of things would be?
Well, you mentioned everything pretty much. So it's training up the peers, working with the peers, being clinical support for them, obviously, because they're going to be hearing stories and may need some feedback and more education from me and support. But also it will be doing clinical assessments on firefighters who are going through issues, doing some short-term counseling, and then referring on to a large variety of clinicians that we have here in the city. And also part of my job, too, is to work collaboratively and collegially with the clinicians in the city and around the city so that we really can build a system for folks, that we know the work that each of us is doing and where to refer people to. And the other passion that I have is also the families of firefighters, because they need support too. And so we want to make sure that they're taken care of also. So that's
I was wondering if someone could talk about maybe like the effects of the past year. I imagine the pandemic and dealing with COVID patients and everything has been very difficult. Is that something you expect people to be having kind of a hard time with? Is that something you might focus on moving forward? Or like, what were the effects of the pandemic?
So that's a great question. And just before these two kind of feel that just to make it like, to give you an example of some of the things that you're both asking about. I mean, look, a lot of people think firefighters like just go into fires. I mean, so that obviously has its own trauma and its own issues that can occur for folks that last a lot longer after that particular incident. But remember, on the EMT side, all the calls that these folks are responding to, the dangerous situations that they're in, and even when dealing with the public, the different aspects where they're putting themselves in harm's way. That's not about a fire, right? It's about domestic violence. It's about all these other situations where they're showing up with or without police and things like that. And so it's very similar to the reasons why our police department already has a psychologist and has had for some time. Or actually a psychiatrist, is the right term for that. So similar, but this is just on the AFR side. But back to the pandemic.
my observation, of course, only is from what I've seen at Fairfax, but the struggles that I saw with firefighters there was that you had two-income families and you had firefighters who were doing shift work, and then you also had the burden of having children at home being homeschooled. So oftentimes that could create its own set of stresses. Then you have a lot of firefighters that were married to nurses, and so these nurses are working in hospitals and getting exposed, and the firefighters are getting exposed. So sometimes the stressors were higher because there was that exposure rate out in the public. And that's some of the things that I'm going to be exploring here in Albuquerque to see, what has been the effect and how can we make it better for them.
Canadian firefighters speak to, we have a general idea of the stresses, the day-to-day stresses, getting into a call, and you got to do this, do that, but also, the traumas that you see. You just give an idea of some of the things that firefighters will need to talk about and need to get resolved.
Yeah, if you can just picture the absolute worst of humanity, or imagine the absolute worst of humanity, that's what our men and women are exposed to on a daily basis. So you have the one-time trauma from going and seeing a horrific scene, but you also have the chronic cumulative trauma that just builds up after seeing that over and over and over again. And I can say, when I came in a long time ago, the attitude was, hey, suck it up. This is what we do. And unfortunately, in the fire service culture, that's gone on for way too long. And so now to see that changing and to let our men and women know that if you are struggling, if you did have a hard time with that call, either we can help you or we can get someone that can help you, and it's just huge. It is just huge for our people.
Can you say more about the stigma? I mean, is that something that's going to be tough to get over? That suck it up, you'll be fine, or is there a change to where people are more firefighters?
So yeah, and I'll let Maya speak a little bit more on this. But yes, change is happening, but it's not happening fast enough. If you just look at the numbers, it's just not happening fast enough. So I'll let Maya add on to that. But yes, that old way of thinking, in my experience and in my opinion, is going away. Maya?
I think that speaks to the prevention part of what we're doing here, is that if we can begin to change a culture, we start, as we said, with the recruits. When you start young in your career and it gets normalized, you can sit around the kitchen table in a firehouse and start to talk about how that call went or how it was affecting you, and talk more about your emotions, because that's something that I think people in the fire service have a hard time dealing with, is the emotions. And if we can begin to normalize that for them beginning in their careers, then as they move up the ranks and they become leaders, then they can normalize it for the men and women underneath them to say it's all right to talk about this, and it's all right to reach out for help, and you're not weak. That, sometimes, as I always like to say, you have that 2-quart bucket and there's 3 quarts of water in the bucket. What do you do with it? So there you have to have a time where you can let go of what you've experienced.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it. Thank you.